Hello and welcome, my lovely psychology students. It's good to spend some time with you again, even though it's just you listening to my voice. But hi, welcome, and welcome to our final session on social influence. We're coming to the end, our last section, and in this section, we're looking at social change. In the previous section, we've looked at minority influence, what the minority needs to be in order to be influential. Now, we're going to look at the role of social influence in this process of social change. So we're going to use our concepts from minority influence and explain how this social change comes about. So, welcome to our last session for this module. So, let us make a start. Now, there are a series of steps that the majority must go through to bring about social change. We know the factors that the minority need to be, right, with regards to social change. We know in order for change, they need to be consistent in their arguments, they need to be committed, and also show flexibility. So we're going to use some of these key concepts to explain how social change actually comes about. So I've decided actually to use a real life issue, so we'll apply it to it, and we can look about, because remember, it's about understanding how the process occurs and also understanding that minority influence isn't 99% of the times a quick change tool. It takes time. It's a gradual element of change. So I'm going to look at and use the real life example of the gay rights movement, looking at the idea of homosexuality and how that has gradually changed over time. So I thought it would be good to have that example because we do use the idea of when we looked at abnormality and we've looked at how our view of mental health has changed over time. For example, homosexuality was regarded as a mental illness, where now it's just part of mainstream. Now we need to understand why it's now part of mainstream. So I thought it'd be a nice example. In your textbook, they're using another example. So this will give you two that you can work off so you can get your head around this idea of what the what the minority need to go through in order to bring about that social change. Sorry about I just made some funny noises. I got tongue-tied there. So in order for this social change to occur, there are 6 steps, and we're going to look at these 6 steps. Step 1 is drawing attention. Step 2 is consistency. Step 3, deeper processing, or we can use the key term of internalization. Step 4, the augmentation principle. Step 5, the snowball effect. And step 6 is the one that you're not familiar with. So this is a new concept, and it is called social cryptomnesia. Don't be scared of the big word, right? Cryptomnesia does sound like a little bit at the end, amnesia, and is linked to that type of thing. So we'll discuss it further. So these are the 6 steps in order for the minority to bring about the change. So let's make a start. Step 1, it's about drawing attention. Remember, if we don't draw attention, how can change come about? So drawing attention is really important, but we don't just draw attention. We need to draw attention through the use of social proof. We need the evidence. We can't just stand there and say, oh, I'm campaigning for this, but we've got nothing to back ourselves up. If we're looking for sexual orientation equality, we need to show the proof of the inequality, the injustices. So we need to bring this social proof. And actually, I was doing some research to see how far back I could find some form of proof. And I found there was actually a law in 1533 that discriminated against male sexual orientation. So really, we've got a hang of a lot of social proof. Throughout the centuries and the most recent decades, we have got a lot of proof to show this discrimination. We've got social accounts of how people have been treated. We have laws. So it's really important. So draw attention by highlighting the facts of the laws that have brought about discrimination to homosexual men. And like I said, these stem back as far as 1533. Throughout the centuries and decades, there have been different laws that have stated male homosexuality was illegal, and it referred to those men as having severe mental illnesses. So really, we have got a huge amount of evidence to actually show that there has been clear discrimination. So it's really important that we have the social proof. We don't just draw attention, but we need to have the evidence to back it up, to be taken seriously. So once we've drawn the attention and we've provided this social proof, we move on to step number 2. And this has got to do with consistency. Now, consistency is a key factor. Consistency has to be over time. So over time, there has been a consistent protest. Remember, this is a diachronic consistency for equality for all, no matter what the person's sexual orientation is. We can go back over time and we can find incidences, records of people who have been campaigning for the same thing over time. So there has to be that time element in their consistency. So it's not one decade saying this and the next decade saying that. There's no consistency over time, but then that links to synchronic consistency, because each generation has brought about protests about the same thing. We've had activists and campaigners who have fought for this equality, for equality. The creation of the gay right movement. It's all about equality and to get rid of the discrimination. So really, consistency is really important. So over the decades, over the most recent decades, we have had more visual and more verbal accounts of this fight for equality. So consistency, diachronic, and synchronic consistency are really important. Step 3. So we've brought the attention and we've given them the proof. The minority, the gay rights movement, have been putting a consistent argue across both time and what everyone is saying. Now we need the majority to start thinking about it. And this is to do with deeper processing of the issues. Internalization. Getting the majority to think about the injustices, the discrimination, the inequalities, getting them to think about it. And due to the different protests across the decades, it has drawn, and still is, the public's attention to the gay rights movement. It has drawn the attention, so they've got that attention. Now it's about processing. And this makes the majority to start to think about this fight for equality and what they represent and stand for. So it's getting people to think, and that's why we need that consistency. If there's no consistency, people are going to say, ugh, they don't know what they stand for. But here we have that consistency both over time and within the movement itself. So it's getting the majority to process that information and start to see these injustices. And what happened? We move on to our next, to further let the majority know that this is a serious issue. We have the augmentation principle that's also going to occur. And this, as you know, you already know what the augmentation principle is about. It's about putting yourself at risk to show that you're serious about what you're standing for and what you're campaigning for or what change you're fighting for. And there's been, within the gay rights movement, there has been numerous incidents where individuals have put themselves at risk. They've gone on, yes, sometimes it's been illegal marches. Illegal marches is like drawing the attention. Come on, pay us some attention. Those illegal marches got a lot of people arrested, got a lot of people beaten up by the police, right? Due to the interactions, physical interactions that they've had. They've put themselves at risk. And do you know what those illegal marches stemmed to? It allowed them to have legal marches. It brought about that change. But they had to let, according to the argumentation principle, they had to let the majority know that they were serious. They're willing to stand up and be accounted no matter what. We can look at lots of incidences through societies going back. And let's give you a nice historical example. Look at the suffragettes. They went on hunger strikes. They tied themselves to railings with chains and locks. Even the one woman died standing out in front of the king's horse. I don't think it was her intentions to die, but she was standing out there with knowing that could be a possibility, that I'm willing to do something so serious to draw the attention. So we've got lots of incidents in our history, recent history, and even things that are happening now, where people are doing things to show that they're serious. So coming back to our one here, there's been lots and lots of protests, lots of different types of actions that have occurred to let people really draw the attention alongside this. And this leads us to step number 5. And sorry about the dog barking if you can hear it. It's my next door neighbours. But let's get back here. I've digressed. Sorry about that. Let's back. Step 5. And step 5 looks at the idea of the snowball effect. We know what the snowball effect, it's a gradual and slow change. Slowly the majority's views start to change. And we can see evidence in that. We can clearly see that there has been both social, a society view, and also legal changes within the gay rights movements, right? What this discrimination, act against discrimination, and the fight for equality has occurred. Laws have changed from one of the most horrendous laws there was, that it was illegal to be homosexual. That it's no longer in existence in our country. Today, that we can have same-sex marriage. Now, come on, there's still a big fight and a lot of change that still needs to occur. But this has gradually changed over time. And this is where it's gone from a minority acceptance now to a majority acceptance. And yes, you'll still have a minority that probably don't agree, but they're now in the minority where the majority think it's just the right thing. So all these changes started from a minority stance and are now part of mainstream society. It has majority support. So this fight, minority fight, is a slow and gradual change. So we have that snowball effect. And when this is happening, and I think a lot of you will fall into this category, and this is our new concept, social cryptomnesia, is a lot of you will fall into this, and there's nothing wrong with falling into it. There's a lot of incidences that I fall into it. Social cryptomnesia is people have a memory of the change, but they don't actually know how the change occurred or what caused the change. So there's a bit of an amnesia there. They know change has happened, but they don't have any recall of how it happened. So we can clearly see that this has happened. I'm sure all you guys kind of know that, it's not illegal. You know, it once was illegal to have a homosexual relationship, but now you know it's not, but you don't know how that change has occurred. So really, this is when everybody kind of goes at it, and therefore it becomes like that acceptable norm. People know, yes, there was a change, but they don't have any more information about it. There is no doubt that the change towards homosexuality has, in brackets, and still is, because there's a lot of campaigning there, occurring both in society views and laws, but very few people remember the details. You all know now it's okay, society-wise and legally-wise, to have a same-sex marriage. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. But actually, you don't know how it all occurred. And that's what happens. We know changes occurred, but we don't know how. And this is when it starts to become the acceptable norm and the majority view. So really, we can clearly understand how this change happens. And this change happens, it brings about from a minority standpoint till eventually it becomes the majority standpoint. And actually, the majority don't actually know many details about it, so it's kind of like it's been blanked out, and therefore it becomes the norm. So here we can see there is a special role in the role of the minority, because we need a minority to bring about social change, so that minority view becomes the majority view, and the once held majority view becomes the minority view with regards to that. So what have also we need to look at, I need to stop saying so, I'm saying that quite a lot in this video. We have to also look at what we've learned from conformity research. And I've got a couple of points up here that I want to draw your attention. So we know how minority influence happens. We've got the 6 steps. We need those steps to occur in order for change to occur. But we've also got to look at, and we're looking at the idea of social influence, and we've looked at conformity and obedience. How can conformity bring about social change, and how can obedience bring about social change? So let's have a look at what we've learned from conformity research. So I said it again, so mental note, stop saying so. Right, I'm digressing, let's get back. When the power of the majority is broken, this is a key thing. In Ash's research, when there was social support, so when he did a variation and there was social support, there was another Confederate who was not agreeing with the majority. They were saying the right answer or the wrong answer in each trial. It seems to give strength to others to resist what the majority are saying, so thereby having the ability to bring about social change. It will be gradual, and we saw that conformity levels dropped considerably when there was social support. So it gives people the strength to actually say, well, somebody else is standing up against the rest. I'm also not going to stand against the rest and view my own opinion. So really, when we look at the idea of resisting conforming, if we have that social support, we're more likely to stand against the majority view, and in itself can bring an element of social change, because that will slowly, snowball effect, influence others, and therefore cause change to occur. We can also use the idea of normative social influence here, because it's about normative social influence is about setting the norm, right? So using key information to inform the majority what others are doing. So if we can tell that actually they're not doing that, what everyone else is doing, actually, that can be very informative. And it's about drawing the attention to what others are doing, identifying it as a norm. Yeah, well, I've got this group of people that are doing that. They're not doing what everybody else is doing. So just like an ASHA study of saying, hold on a minute, they're not going with them. I don't necessarily have to. So therefore, if we're taking this information and turning it into a normative social influence, and therefore drawing people's attention to what other people are saying, well, this is also a norm, and actually that can bring about social change. So we can use the concept of normative social influence to inform the majority what others are doing, identifying, saying, look, these are what these people are doing, that's their norm. So you're giving, in essence, you're kind of thinking, oh, well, I'll go along with them. And it goes against the majority view. So we have learned quite a few things about what conformity has told us through its research and how that in itself can bring about social change. Social change is looking at the minority view and resisting that of the majority. But if we've got that little bit of support and seeing that somebody else is standing up against the majority, we may join them. And then somebody else may join us. And again, you can see that you've got that snowball effect occurring. And also, we just need to we need some evidence regarding the role of normative influence. So a little bit of AO3 here. There is support for the role of normative social influence in social change. So remember, normative social influence we've looked at a minute ago. It's saying this is how other people, that's their norm. How can that then bring about social change? Now, Nolan et al. In 2008, quite a nice recent piece of research, found if a perceived social norm was created, social change could occur. So a perceived social norm is created. And what the research focused on was to reduce the energy consumption of a particular community. Now, this was done in America, San Diego, California. And they had two conditions. They had a control condition, and in that control condition, each week they received a message and just asked them to save energy, to help, ask them to help, save the planet or by saving energy. No mention of any other person. So it's just like a key message out about energy conservation. And not to consume as much energy within their house. Just a general message. In the experimental condition, what they did was for every week, just like in the control condition, every week for a month, they got that message. The key message was that most residents were trying to reduce their energy usage. So they were actually, in their message, in the experimental group, they were given the message that the majority of people in their community are trying to reduce their energy consumption. So there was a link in the message to others. So what did they find? They found a significant decrease in energy uses in the first group, in the experimental group, compared to the control group. So therefore, if they found in the experimental group that actually energy consumption decreased, in the control group, it didn't. What was the difference? The difference was the link to other people. Because in their message, it was the norm within their neighbors to help reduce, so they started to follow the norm. So here we've got nice supportive evidence. Nolan et al., the studies in your book, so you can add that to your notes. But this is just nice AO3. It supports the idea of normative social influence by creating that social norm, by saying what others are doing, even though it's just perceived, actually, it can bring about social change. So we've learned that from conformity. They're going along thinking, oh, if my neighbours are doing it, I'll do it. It's the norm. Everybody's doing it, so I'll just do it. So we can clearly see that happens. So what have we learned from obedience research? Now let me just bring all these up. So obedience research, our key guy is Milgram's research. In Milgram's research, in the variations, he highlighted the importance of the disobedient role model. That links to when the naive participant who was a teacher was assigned another teacher who, as you know, was a Confederate. When they're confined that, and then that other teacher refused to go on any further, so therefore that's the disobedient role model, we saw that obedience levels dropped. So we can clearly show us that within the correct circumstances, going against or standing up against the authority figure or the person in power can bring about social change. So here we can actually use obedience for good. Having that role model standing up against the power source, the people of power, the legitimate authorities, actually can bring about social change, because you have a role model saying, and you'll probably think to yourself, well, if they're going against it, I don't need to do it. So you've got, again, it's that social support, isn't it, that highlights that at times it is good to be disobedient, especially if it's going to be harmful, if you're seeing that there's some form of injustice. If we have that role model that stands up against it, then we're more likely to follow and be disobedient. Now, I know Zimbardo we didn't look at Zimbardo and the idea of obedience, but he also comments here, he stated that obedience can be a tool that brings about social change. And he highlighted the idea of gradual commitment. Now, gradual commitment means you slowly commit to something, right? So it's something that happens over time, very slowly. And that can start off with one small instruction that you're given to obey. So somebody gives you a tiny instruction that you need to obey in the sense of, come on, Jackie, there's some rubbish over there. Please, will you pick it up? So the teacher told Jackie to pick it up. Simple little instructions. So I'm starting to pick it up. And then they're giving another instruction that may be slightly bigger. Could you go at lunchtime and do this about cleaning up? So again, social change. Could you get a few more friends to come and help us at lunchtime, and we're going to be litter picking? So you obey. So it's gradually giving you bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger types of instructions that you obey, till eventually you actually think, well, littering is wrong. So this gradual commitment can actually bring about social change. It can be used for good. Gradual commitment can also be used for bad, but we don't want to look at that right now. But it can be used for good. So Zimbardo says it can be a tool, if it's used properly, to bring about social change. And therefore, gradual commitment can lead to that, because you're slowly giving instructions that people obey, and actually it'll eventually change how society is actually interacting, because we all kind of know that it's not good to litter. So really that would have been started off as an instruction given to us at some stage, whereas you kind of drop something and the majority of us feel guilty thinking, oh, let me pick it back up. And it brings about social change. So it's a gradual commitment. So over time, these slowly bring about social change. So we have learned from obedience that in the right situation, if we have a disobedient role model, it can then act as a force to stop other people obeying, and therefore social change. And then gradual commitment over time. Slow instructions over time can actually then bring about social change for the good. Let's move on to a little bit AO3. There is a problem here. If we're using these studies, Ash, Zimbardo, Bickman, all these studies, and Milgram, it does lead to a problem, right? It is a problem. That's what we're going to focus on here. The explanations as to why or how social influence leads to social change can be challenged due to it being based on the research we have just mentioned, as there are issues with their methodology. So we can bring back some of the AO3 that we've used prior to this to actually say, really, can this social change actually occur because it's based on research that may not actually have a good methodology, or there's issues with the methodology? For example, all the research was based on laboratory experiments, so it's an artificial environment. That's a problem because we're trying to apply it to real life situations. An artificial environment to a real life environment, quite different. Artificial environment in a laboratory experiment, high level of control. The real world environment, really, there's an issue there because it's not controllable. Because we don't know what's going to happen within those variables. There's a lot of other variables that come into play compared to that as a lab. So there are issues here. Limited application, low population validity as well. You know, this limited application as well applies to our population. Majority of the studies were based with males, right? They were based in individualistic societies. Can it be applied to collectivist societies? Can it be applied to women because it's males? Mainly carried out in America. So cultural differences as well. There are a lot of issues here that can cause a problem because what they're doing is they're being, oh, I like this cultural one, beta bias. Beta bias means that you're presuming that men and women are the same. But actually, men might obey and women might obey differently at different levels. So yeah, there's a lot of issues here. A lack of internal validity due to the lack of realism. Did the participants actually believe what they were doing? You know, so we have a lot of issues. There's a lot that you can pick up here. So if you're probably highlighting methodological issues, we've looked at them in the previous section, you can apply them here. So there is an issue with the regards to them. And that leads to application, real life world application. Does it apply to the real world? So we've got issues there. Another AO3 that we can use is that there's a big hurdle in bringing about social change. It's not as straightforward. I mean, minority influence isn't as straightforward. It's a low, drawn out, slow process. But even if people want to change, they might have other hurdles they've got to overcome before they might side with the minority. And even though they are convinced by the minority or they have the same views, the minority represents a type of person. And this could be a problem because there could be stereotypical views of that individual. And therefore they will not act or side publicly with that of the minority because they just don't want to be associated with these stereotypical views. You know, somebody who is campaigning not to chop down the Amazon jungle, all the trees and vegetarian, they might be seen as tree huggers. And they don't want to be seen as that, because that's everybody, oh, look at their bit whack job, they just love to hug trees. Or if somebody wants to stand up for equal rights for women, they might be seen, oh, feminist, a male hater. But feminism isn't male haters, right? So they might have these hurdles of these like stereotypical views, and they don't want to be associated with that. And that can be a problem and a major hurdle or barrier to social change. Because if people can't overcome these barriers or overcome these hurdles, then social change isn't going to occur. So we've looked at 3 evaluations throughout. We've looked at the idea that there's support for the use of normative social influence that can bring about social change. We've got issues surrounding the evidence that this is based on, and how does it really can be applied to real world situations, so the methodology. And we've got these social barriers that come in place that actually, even though people may want to publicly side with the minority view, they are afraid of what that will mean for them. Will they be labeled under the same umbrella? And they don't want that. So privately, they agree, but publicly, they don't change that behavior. So take at least one other evaluation and add that into your notes. So take the time to work through this, make your notes, evaluations, but it's understanding how minority influence can bring about social change. But remember, it's not something that happens overnight. It is a slow process that takes time, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of convincing in order for some form of social change to occur. Well, my wonderful psychology students, thank you for taking the time to work through the lesson with me. Remember, if you have any questions, no matter how big or small, you contact me. Right? Really important that you do that. I really want you to get your head around this. Well, my lovelies, have a wonderful day.